You're listening to Simple Health Radio, the podcast about recognizing medical emergencies and promoting wellness. Your host is Dr. Emron, an experienced ER physician who has treated thousands of people just like you. Information on the show is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always talk to your doctor or go to the nearest emergency room with any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Simple Health Radio. Today's question comes to us from Terrell Jackson, the host of a podcast called Health Science for the Rest of Us. You can visit her website at www.healthscienceforeveryone.com. She recorded a question and sent it in. It was a question about fear and death. So let's have a listen.
Hi, Dr. Emron. This is Terrell of the Health Science for the Rest of Us podcast. It's a show where we take a super practical look at the body and its shenanigans and the world of fascinating ways we try and keep it healthy. Some of our top episodes are on stool samples and body odor and ambulance rides and health voting. So if anyone is interested in checking us out, they can find us at healthscienceforeveryone.com or wherever they listen to podcasts. In the meantime, I have a question for you. The question is there really such a thing as being scared to death? Thanks so much for all that you do, including taking my wacky question.
So let me thank Terrell for sending in a great question. There's a lot of Hollywood-style drama regarding being scared to death. That's the whole basis for Halloween movies and horror films. Medically speaking, this is what we called the fight or flight response. So basically, our bodies have a defense mechanism. When the brain recognizes a danger or an enemy, it sends signals immediately to the rest of the body. Either you have to prepare to fight the enemy or take flight, which means run away. The body has to divert resources from certain organs to other parts of the body in order for that to happen. The primary hormone that's responsible for this is called adrenaline, also known as epinephrine. Some people actually like the feeling of being scared. They love going to haunted houses and trying activities like bungee jumping or extreme sports. The adrenaline that's released actually gives them a rush or a high. And the same thing happens when you play football or compete in a track meet. So what are the effects of adrenaline? Well, there are several actions that occur when adrenaline is released into the body. These include raising the pulse rate, increasing the blood pressure, increasing blood circulation to our muscles, increasing our breathing rate, increasing air into the lungs, and actually enlarging or even dilating the pupils. The last thing that happens is a change in the metabolism to increase the amount of blood sugar that's available as an energy source. Now, why would adrenaline do all of these very different things? If you think about in preparation for a fight, you want your body to be prepared in the best way possible. So increasing your heart rate, increasing your blood sugar, and dilating your eyes actually gives you a sense of heightened awareness. If you're planning to do the opposite, which is the flight or the runaway response, the same things would still benefit you. If you're able to see in the dark or run a little faster or jump a little higher, you'll be able to get away from the danger. So whether you're stopping to fight or whether you're planning to fly away or run away, the adrenaline would still benefit you in both ways. The problem is that in modern society, adrenaline can affect the body in a lot of negative ways, especially if it happens multiple times in a short period. For example, if you have somebody who's going through an abusive relationship, every day could be a fight or flight response, whether it's physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, any other type of abuse. Now, if somebody has a car accident, they're going to have a large amount of adrenaline release just from that injury itself. And then let's say later in the day, they finally get into work, they have an argument with their boss as to why they were late. Now they have a second adrenaline response. Maybe they get into such a bad situation, they get fired from their job. They're sent home and they have to confront their spouse or their landlord that they won't be able to pay the bills. That's going to cause even more adrenaline to be released. So you can see in the course of just one day, over just a few hours, they've had 3 separate events that occurred, all of which increase the adrenaline to very high amounts. Now, excessive adrenaline is also linked with high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, which is high blood sugar, and even kidney problems. Now, the question that Terrell asked is whether people can be scared to death. So the answer is yes. In the short term, we do know that adrenaline affects the heart in some good ways, but also some bad ways. Adrenaline works on special receptors that are in the heart muscle. When these receptors are activated, large amounts of calcium rush into the heart cells. Calcium is necessary for heart muscle contraction. So if you have a large amount of adrenaline and a large amount of calcium, the heart muscle keeps contracting and it doesn't get a chance to relax. The heart is unique because it has special electrical connections, the nerves of the heart, which establish a rhythm. We call that a pacemaker. So think of it as a ticking of a clock. So every 1 second, the little hand is going to move into the next position. So after 60 seconds, you have 1 minute. When adrenaline is released, it causes the electrical connections to become hyperstimulated. So now instead of 60 beats per minute, it's 100 or 120. And instead of being simple beats, these are hyper-contracting beats. So the body is really pumping out a large amount of volume abnormally. And it's this type of abnormal rhythm that leads to sudden death. Now, if somebody already has a heart condition, whether it's an enlarged heart, maybe congestive heart failure, or any previous history of a heart rhythm abnormality, it can easily tip that person into something called VFib, also called ventricular fibrillation.
You may not know it yet, but you definitely want to subscribe to the Health Science for the Rest of Us podcast. It's a show where we explore the body.
Are you smelling your armpit?
Body odor.
Its shenanigans.
Actually, my menopause and perimenopause. Is this the part where I can talk about me?
And the world of fascinating ways we try and keep it healthy.
Can you just be a human guinea pig professional?
Yes.
So according to the internet, you are not pregnant. You have a urinary tract infection.
Oh, no.
Full episodes with me, I'm Terrell, and my very fun special co-hosts are available now at healthscienceforeveryone.com or your favorite podcast app. So subscribe now. Tell your friends to subscribe and brace yourselves for all the health science adventure you can handle.
So VFib is life-threatening, and that's the rhythm that causes people to have a very improper heartbeat because the blood cannot be circulated. It can't pump out from the heart. VFib is not a sustainable rhythm. So within a few seconds, maybe to a few minutes, that person is going to die. So that's called sudden death. And the primary underlying arrhythmia or abnormal heart rhythm is VFib, also called ventricular fibrillation. Now, there's a second way that people can be scared to death, but that's more cumulative. So we talked about people who have arguments at work or at home or at school. They're naturally going to have releases of adrenaline on a regular basis. But other things can still cause adrenaline releases, including heavy traffic, financial problems, or stress about an engineering product. What happens with different projects is that you'll have adrenaline released periodically. Every time you get to a meeting, or every time you cross a certain pathway, or every time you get something accomplished, something else is going to come up. And large amounts of adrenaline that are released over time actually make people feel lightheaded or dizzy. Some people get tunnel vision. It'll go away, but then it comes back again. And so every time they have an argument or new stresses in their life, even if it's not a life-threatening situation, it's cumulative because the adrenaline keeps on affecting the heart muscle. It makes it contract abnormally. It makes those heart rhythms become more abnormal, and it also affects the blood sugar and it affects the kidneys. So these people are going to be at a high risk of dying a month or 3 months or 6 months later due to the excessive adrenaline. Now, for example, after the 9/11 attacks in New York City, there was a 35% increase in heart attacks in those local hospitals for 2 months after that event. It was researched and other causes were excluded, but stress of that horrible event caused a number of people to develop heart conditions that directly caused untimely death. So it wasn't sudden death, meaning they didn't die immediately right after the incident occurred, but cumulative. So within weeks to months, it was directly related. The problem is that on death certificates, when we sign them as doctors, we have to choose one primary reason for death. Sometimes it's obvious, for example, a stroke, or maybe trauma, or internal bleeding. So when something like this happens and somebody dies before they make it to the hospital, it's assumed it's going to be a sudden death due to either a cardiac arrhythmia, like the VFib, or something related to that pathway. There's no box to check scared to death or anxiety. That doesn't make sense. It's not something we can put down medically, but we know that it contributes heavily to those situations. So that's why it's very difficult to track the exact numbers of people who've died or become scared to death. Now, we do know that some people are going to be much more predisposed to having complications, including VFib or any other arrhythmia. Those people typically are overweight. They'll have a history of high blood pressure. Maybe they're on medication, maybe they're not. They're going to have a history of diabetes, and they may have some other genetic or family history as well that predisposes them. On top of that, if you add in things like smoking, drugs, alcohol, and other complications, it's going to be very complex. And so that's why any additional insult from the adrenaline is going to have a high risk of death for those people. So I hope you learned a little bit more about being scared to death, the fight or flight response, and adrenaline. So I want to thank Terrell again for sending in a great question. You can check out their website and the podcast, Health Science for the Rest of Us, and you can visit their website, www.healthscienceforeveryone.com, and you can listen to some of their recent episodes. If you have a question that you've been thinking about, just record it on your phone or your computer, connect with us on social media, and we'll give you an email address so you can send it to me. I'll research it and I'll do my best to answer it on one of next week's episode. Be sure to visit our website, simplehealthradio.com, for even more information, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Spotify.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Visit simplehealthradio.com to read the blog, follow links mentioned on this episode, and easily share content with your family and friends. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and the 3 and Out Radio Network. Be sure to connect with Dr. Emron on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Tumblr to send us your questions and ideas.